Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
I find hover with the pencil and trackpad on iPad very interesting because it actually helps with discoverability. Because I mentioned, say, in the timeline screen, on a subtitle card, we have the start and end buttons for the start and end time. But we know from our users, on iPhone at least, a lot of people don't realize that that's a button. Whereas on iPad, it's very obvious because if you move over it, it lifts up. But then also we amended the timeline, so when you see the subtitle cards and you move the cursor or the pencil over the words to split subtitles, it shows you exactly which word will be split, and it puts a little cursor there to show you that it will split before that word. So it's very, very clear how it works. I'm sure we have a few people who come into this view, and despite the instruction text we have at the top, they press play on a video and they're tapping words and it's splitting and doing all kinds of stuff. They don't understand what's going on. It's one of the challenges. So it's great for discoverability.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. In this episode, we are joined by Marc Palmer, the developer behind Captionista, and you'll also see his work in the awesome Concepts app, where he is the iOS UI developer. In this discussion, we discuss how he uses Swift Playgrounds, some of his favorite iPad apps, including IA Writer, Working Copy, Notion, LumaFusion, Final Cut Pro, GarageBand, and Logic Pro. We touch on his work at Concepts and dive deep into his awesome captioning app, Captionista, that just hit version 1.5. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. By supporting this podcast, you'll also be supporting my new podcast, Vision Pros, and also get early access to episodes for that show with your support either on Patreon or Apple Podcasts. My great thanks to everyone that does support the podcast. It means a great deal and is greatly appreciated. Learn more about my new podcast, Vision Pros, at www.visionpros.fm. With that said, here's my discussion with Marc. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Marc.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a thrill to have you on. I've wanted to chat with you for a bit here. So for those that don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself, a bit of your background and who you are?
Sure. Of course I can. I started programming when I was about 11 years old, which is a long time ago now, in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
On the old computers that couldn't do very much. And then I did a bunch of DOS and Windows programming, ended up doing web and Java stuff. And then iPhone time, I started getting interested in Objective-C. Thought that was going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. I had done some mobile phone games for with Java previously. So I had a bit of experience in mobile and knew how difficult it was.
Yeah.
And it looked so much more interesting on the iPhone.
Yeah.
So I sniffed around that for a long time, but Objective-C was really weird and and difficult to justify spending a lot of time on. But then eventually in 2013, I got my first app out and got my first paid iOS gig. And then I've been consulting iOS since then.
Very cool.
Also, I mean, various family and friends and jobs along the way have been on the fringes of music and video stuff. So that's kind of influenced me a lot, in terms of coming to Apple and the design ethos and these kind of more interesting, more tactile applications. You can hold them in your hand and experience them viscerally, rather than making websites for soft drink brands,
right?
Things like that.
What was that first app in 2013?
Oh, that was Soundproof, a music practice app. So it was just a looping music video player, basically, with some nice custom UI elements. But then Apple Music came around a little bit later, and it was already too difficult to get tracks that you out of the library. The DRM stuff made it difficult, and a few apps found a way around that. but it keeps breaking, I think. So,
right.
Yeah, I knocked that one on the head. I didn't have time to do it anymore. It was mainly to help my daughter, who was learning to play cello at the time, and I was frustrated that there was no decent app for setting start and end points in a song and looping them, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. The music app scene is just fascinating. If I was going through school now, just such a different experience with all the tools we have. And we're buying like these $100 like metronomes and like tuners and stuff, and now you can just use your phone. And it's a good experience there. Yeah.
Yeah. Every music app has a tuner in it.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I don't know if you tried Logic Pro on the iPad now. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, we'll have to chat about that in a bit. I know that's on the list of apps that you are diving into. What is your current iPad setup these days?
My iPad setup is quite interesting because my day job involves developing for Concepts, the sketching app. So I'm doing a lot of testing on iPads. So my desk has 3 iPads on it. I have a 2021 M1 iPad Pro 12.9 inch as my primary device, and I put all my betas on that and use it as my main personal iPad. I have a 2020 12.9 inch iPad Pro, and that I use as my main testing device. So I have the latest stable iOS on that.
12.9 or 11 for that one?
Sorry, so 12.9 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's the previous generation. I always have to get the latest one for testing anyway. So I roll them over. So then I have the previous gen, although I don't have an M2 yet, so I'm not that up to date. But yeah, so I have my 2020, which was the first one with LiDAR. I have that one. And then I have an old, I think, is it 10.7 iPad Pro? The one that still had the home button.
10.5.
It was... Is it 10.5? Okay, yeah.
That's
it was
my
the weird
favorite
one.
home buttoned iPad. That thing was great. Super thin side bezels. Just delight to hold and use.
It was a strange outlier in the range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was priced really good as well at the time.
I love that thing.
But yeah, so that's one of my daughter's old devices. So I've got that for my previous gen OS testing. So
and you can try the original Apple Pencil with that one, and
yeah, exactly. So I've got 15, 16, and now 17 betas on 3 different devices.
That's awesome. And Magic Keyboard with your main iPad, or what do you use with that?
Lucky guess. Yes, that is correct. Yep. I have the Magic Keyboard on that, and obviously I switch it over sometimes to the older iPad if I need to do some testing there. Doing things with keyboard shortcuts and trackpad,
Yeah. And have you tried hooking up 2 external displays? Is that something you've messed around with at all?
A little bit, not very much. It's nice. I don't have enough extra external displays to take it away from my Mac. But yeah, occasionally we have to test things, especially in the in Concepts, which has a special preview mode for external screens.
Oh, nice. And your current Mac setup, is it a desktop or laptop? What are you using there?
It's a MacBook Pro M1 with all the RAM, but not fully spec'd CPU wise, and a crusty old horrible LG 5K display. The first gen, it works well, but it's it works.
Yeah, it's got 5 of the Ks. So
yeah.
And what's your kind of current relationship to the iPad? Is it a companion to your Mac? Do you test out code within Swift Playgrounds? Like, what do you use the iPad for outside of testing Concepts and Captionista?
Really, I use it as a reference device. I use the Apple Developer app a lot for WWDC sessions. There's so many of those to read all the time and watch. I do use Playgrounds quite a lot to make little scratchpad things to prove out new bits of code or try out new APIs. That's super useful. Books I use a lot. I do notes and planning in Notion quite a lot for work and personal things. So yeah, it's some of those things I use the Mac for as well, and obviously with iCloud, the sync between them makes it removes the concern about which one I'm using, which is great. It's best of all worlds. But the iPad sometimes comes into the bedroom, the MacBook doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
That sounds a bit wrong.
Right. Yeah.
But what I mean by that is, I can sit in bed at night with the iPad and hack something out in Playgrounds, whereas I wouldn't do that with a MacBook.
Gotcha. Yeah. And will you take stuff that you're testing in Playgrounds and throw that in Xcode later on?
I don't do that too often.
Okay.
It's funny on the Mac, isn't it? There's the Playgrounds app, which is separate from Xcode, which also supports Playgrounds, and it feels a bit clunky and fiddly. So I tend to just work something out, and I might copy and paste some code over into Xcode once I've done that work. I have to say, I do enjoy Swift Playgrounds, but the text editing in it drives me crazy.
Yeah,
it's terrible compared to the Xcode text editor.
Okay. Yeah. Are you using the beta of Swift Playgrounds? I understand there's one for iOS 17 this year.
I saw that as well just the other day. I haven't had time to install that yet.
Okay. No. Yeah. So the developer app, you use this on the iPad. Is it mainly you're watching like the videos from WWDC on the iPad and then kind of working on the Mac as you're watching?
Yes, that's almost exactly what happens. Sometimes I might split view or picture-in-picture on the iPad and then bring up Playgrounds to try things out. But generally, yes. I mean, those new videos they make are excellent. They're pretty short. If listeners have not experienced them, they are developer-centric, but they're a lot shorter than the old sessions that Apple used to do, but they're pretty dense sometimes and rapid.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to pick up on, and you have to rewatch a lot sometimes.
With the code snippets, is that done as like a bonus feature within the actual video, or will you like screenshot or pause the video and use the new feature with an iOS to copy code right out of the video or photo?
I can't remember if I've done that, but you're right in what you highlight, in that the code snippets that are inside the app aren't very accessible, when you're actually watching the video. And there's quite a bit of clunkiness around there. It would be nice to see some improvements there. But I mean, live text would be great for that. I hadn't thought of that. It's a good idea. Yeah. And then IA Writer is next up on your list here.
What uses do you have here? Is it outside of actual code work? Were you doing other writing?
Yeah, I mean, all of my writing starts in Markdown. Blog posts, marketing content for Captionista, technical documents for the day job as well. All that kind of thing always starts in Markdown and IA Writer. I've been using it for years. I love their products and their design. And I don't know if you've seen or played with IA Presenter.
No.
Yeah. If the thing is, I wish I gave presentations because then I could use it.
Yeah, it's funny. There are apps that are like, I wish I had a use of this because it's such a nice app.
Yeah. Well, I was a big fan of the Mac app DeckSet. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah.
That's you write some Markdown and it creates presentation slides from it, and you don't have to worry about the styling. It's all template based. And IA Presenter is that gone crazy. It's amazing. It's so good, and it's supported on iPad as well. So
that's really cool.
It's very nice. But yeah, their products are fantastic. But yeah, IA Writer is where I use IA Writer like a lot of people would use drafts.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Basically.
Yeah. And then working copy. What's that? Is that for kind of website stuff or?
Sort of. It's a Git client. So being an engineer, I use Git all the time for versioning source files. And on the Captionista front, the code is all in Git. The website is generated from Git.
Okay.
So working copy allows me to access those files on my iPhone or iPad, wherever I am, and I can make little tweaks. I don't make tweaks to code, to Captionista code on it, really. I might check something if I'm thinking about something late at night and I want to see what the code actually does. But the website, for example, is built from Jekyll, so I can just modify a file on working copy, push the change to Git. My host, which is called Cloud Cannon, pulls from Git whenever there's a change, regenerates the site with Jekyll, and it's all published through a CDN. And all I did was make an edit on the iPad and press push.
And
it's
working
amazing.
copy, does it give you a preview of the web page, or is that all just hoping for the best?
yeah. It's it doesn't give me a preview. It is hoping for the best.
Okay.
But I have been doing web stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
And Jekyll is, I'm almost all the time just editing Markdown. It's just typos and
is there
bad links.
Good way to test out web page code on the iPad? A good app to you want to do that and then push it to working copy.
I think there are quite a few for writing or editing and previewing websites, but I don't know that there are any that have Git integration.
Yeah. Okay.
You're asking about something like what is now called Nova by Panic on the Mac.
That's
I
right.
don't know if you've seen. Yeah.
Coding used to be a thing. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Coda, they sold the name and then changed it into Nova.
That's right.
I always had Coda but never really needed it. Obviously, being a Panic fan, was interested in what they were doing. But Nova is as a Mac app that I use a lot as well. So I'm pretty sure there are quite a few out there for iPad.
Okay. And then with Git, does Xcode directly integrate with that, or are you having the copy between Xcode and Git? Or
no, Xcode supports Git directly, but I don't actually use that. I use a Mac app called Tower.
Okay.
Which is a very good Git client. But it's kind of an implementation detail, really. It's just working copy is, I think, the only way to get Git access on iPad. It's fantastic, and it has great Files app integration with the file provider APIs. Anders, who makes it, has gone way beyond what most companies do with their file integration. It's really good.
That's cool. And then Notion. This is the text Notion, not the music Notion app that I had an interview with briefly ago.
Yes. And Notion is a web-based service for note-taking and ad hoc databases, really. I don't know if you've used it.
I've dabbled in it. Nothing in it has really hooked me quite yet.
It took me a little while to understand what on earth was going on. Yeah. I know too much about databases. And you're thinking, this can't be working. How does, surely it won't do that. That won't work, will it? But once you understand what you can and can't do, it's actually very powerful. But it is a web service, and the Mac app and the iPad app are really just wrappers around. Yeah,
and that's clear when you use it, which is fine for the utility it provides.
It's pretty well done. It is a bit disappointing. I don't like web apps. I like native apps. And you really feel it in Notion with the text editing, which is pretty dreadful. You trying to select text and do all the normal things, it just behaves strangely, and that's a really hard problem for them to solve with a web-based editor.
Yeah. And what kind of data do you end up putting in there?
It's interesting. I only recently adopted it personally in the last few months, but the Captionista have a table in there of the releases that are have been released and are forthcoming and in progress. And I have a media list there to contact, people like you to get in touch with when there's a new release, and tracking who I have contacted, what status that is, a kind of mini CRM. Mini CRM. And also I have the content calendar. That's one of the templates they have. So you can set up like a Kanban board or a Trello style board. Where you create cards for all the different bits of social media or marketing content you want to create, track the status, put them in review, attach images that you're going to put into posts, all that kind of thing. It's been really useful for that.
Very cool. And then this is the the fun set of apps, I would say. Or they're all fun, as they would say on the talk show. Everything's fun. But the media apps, LumaFusion is the first one here. And there's also Final Cut Pro. So I'm kind of curious when LumaFusion's the right answer versus now Final Cut Pro, which is also on iPad, which they're similar, but very different apps.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I will say from the outset, I am not a video professional.
Mm-hmm. You use it primarily for marketing of Captionista. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, part of the thing with Captionista being an app for subtitling and captioning social videos, I need to walk the walk.
Yes.
and social videos are really the main way to market stuff these days.
Yeah.
So you've got to do it. So I started using LumaFusion at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that was it's pretty great. I personally struggle a little bit with with how far they've gone from native iOS UI.
Okay.
In it, because it feels like you have to learn every little nuance of the interface.
Yeah. My one challenge I always have with LumaFusion, I use it for the YouTube version, which is just a thumbnail to have on YouTube with the audio.
Yeah.
Is when I send an image in the LumaFusion, I have a hard time finding that file I just send in there. So sometimes I'll end up with 3 or 4 of the same image in there because eventually it will highlight it and show you where the file you imported is, but it doesn't always do that. So sometimes send that artwork in there quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's some things took me a really long time to work out, but pretty much everything I ever imagined I needed to do with it, it could do once I found it out.
Yeah.
Which was very impressive. It's a super impressive app from a technical perspective. But
multicam's in there, which is even more. Yeah. I think more powerful than Final Cut Pro because I think it lets you do more angles and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't played with that much, but it's back to that. My gripe about the custom UI stuff is. Yeah. Similar to you, I think it's going to export and save. It's very confusing, and then you essentially end up pressing the same button 3 times, I think, and different menus pop up at each stage. Thinking, when is it actually going to export? What's happening?
Yeah,
it's quite frustrating. But then contrasting that with Final Cut Pro, which of course is very new, I wanted to try that. I'm interested in the video workflows as well. Yeah. So, for my users, what video apps they're going to use at the more professional end of it. Other users won't do any of this. They'll just record something and then put some titles on it.
Right.
But if you're actually doing edits in Final Cut Pro or LumaFusion, it's important to see how they can fit together in a workflow and what pitfalls there might be and the strengths of the different apps. So Final Cut Pro's release was interesting, and I used that for all of the 1.5 release videos rather than LumaFusion, just to dog food it. Yeah. And for simple edits, it's been really good. I really like what they've done. It's all very familiar controls because it's Apple. But then again, quite a few things I had to dig around a lot to find out how to do them. Had problems with the HDR levels of text coming out wrong and things like that. Yeah. But it's great the settings there, because those kinds of things are not in every app. HDR is actually quite challenging for us too. But then of course I also look at what's it like to put text over a video in Final Cut Pro.
Yeah, for you to natively do captioning within those apps, right?
Yeah, and I walked away quite slowly from that. It's fine if you want to put a word or two on a video, but I wouldn't recommend subtitling a video in that.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't make Captionista.
Right. Yeah.
It's surprising how little time is given to that kind of UI.
Yeah, it's curious, and I'm wondering if they'll improve that going forward. It seems like one of those features that they might have a look at.
Yeah, they might completely short circuit it. I mean, there's a difference, isn't there, between subtitling or captioning and titling.
Right. Yeah, titling is completely different. You have the opening of Star Wars, where it has that scrolling thing. Yeah. That's not subtitling. And then there's also, I believe you can export videos with subtitle metadata, where video apps could then display that, but it's not hard coded into the video that you're seeing, and that's a whole different thing. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I don't understand really how they came up with these names in the industry, but obviously I had to research it.
Yeah.
Closed captioning is captioning information that is in the video or alongside it, the separate file.
That's the thing on like Apple TV. You can turn it on and off, and I'm constantly turning it off because I don't like to read my movies, but other people in the able do.
Yeah. So closed captions you can turn on and off, and they are also a better solution for accessibility,
right?
Because accessibility users can tailor how they are displayed.
Yeah.
Whereas open captions, it's actually rendered into the video. You can't turn it off.
Right.
And that's not quite as good for accessibility, depending on the style you choose.
Yeah. And you do get to pick the style. It's more of a visual, like TikTok especially. This is like part of the metaphor of that platform.
Yes, exactly. And it becomes part of marketing and your branding image as well.
Yeah.
So that's, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but in Captionista, it's a whole fascinating subject. There's different usages and terms for this stuff.
Yeah. And the other thing with Final Cut Pro is I don't think you can resize the window. It's one of those old school iPad apps that not awesome in external displays because it's just the standard iPad size.
Oh, no.
And it doesn't work with split screen and split view. It's,
Wow.
It's one of those old apps, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine they've probably been working on it for a really long time.
I think so.
It's been hard.
Yes. So hopefully the next update, or version 2, will have a full external monitor, support where it feels like right now it's meant for working on the go on the iPad, then you use the Mac when you get back to the office. But I hope it gets there.
I strongly suspect that team is really pumped that they got to 1.0 and now they're going to be going hard on improving it. They'll be painfully aware of all the limitations.
Yes, for sure. And then GarageBand and Logic Pro. So I've actually not done my free trial yet of Logic Pro. I need to. I want to at some point. But it is all about music on iPad. There is no podcasting support at all, fair rights, where you do that on iPad. But from what I understand from music and of things, it's pretty awesome.
I mean, I'm not a heavy Logic Pro user on the Mac. I've dabbled because my daughter's a musician, and I've had to historically try to help her out with some things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I downloaded it instantly and started playing around. It makes you want to play around with things. It's great. The instruments they have in it are they've got a lot of stuff from GarageBand and then brought that across, but improved them further. It's quite amazing. It's a really good job, and they put a lot of work into the in-app tutorial system, because I never had the patience to learn how to use Logic for Mac because it's massive. Yeah.
And so Logic on iPad, it's fairly intuitive. Like GarageBand, it seems like it's designed for it to be a toy box. Is it similar levels, or is it a level beyond that with like being a bit confusing?
No, I would say it's quite similar. It doesn't feel like a toy like GarageBand.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure that hardcore Mac Logic Pro users will say that. But it doesn't feel like a toy. It's super powerful, and they've we do have a problem on iPad and iOS generally, don't we, with discoverability of features?
Totally.
And I have this for my own apps as well. It's a balance between throwing tons of text to people to try to explain how things work, or letting them progressively discover. On the Mac, you have hover
states where you can put stuff there, like the Mac discoverability. You can click on stuff, and you don't know if you can tap on everything. Versus, I don't know. It's a bit different.
Yeah, and of course, because you're always working to a touch area, a minimum size of about 44 points on the screen. If you imagine laying a 44-point grid over the UI, then you've only got so many options for where you can put things.
There's no menu bar really. Where on the Mac you can just search in the menu bar to find the menu item to like, oh, that's where that is.
Yeah, exactly. But ironically, of course, if you have an app that has good keyboard shortcut support, you can
have a menu bar
press that key.
right within there, yeah.
Or and it's in there. But yeah, so, and again, going back to LumaFusion, they went for smaller UI elements to get a denser UI, which is, absolutely fine if you're using a pencil, for example.
Yeah.
But it can be, it's challenging. But I think they've done a pretty good job in Logic Pro. I recommend anyone who's even has a passing interest in music has a play with it, because they have these interactive tutorials now, and you can say, I want to learn how to do certain kind of edits, or the score editor or something, and it'll start the tutorial with a little sample project in the actual app. They're not videos, and it tells you
very cool
step by step what to do. It puts little hints up of what the next thing is to do, and drags you through the process.
Yeah.
Which is, that was amazing. That got me up to speed very quickly.
So score editor, are there actual notes in there like you would with Sibelius and Finale, or is it what's scared me away from Logic has always been seems to be about performance versus I'm used to just having music notation where I'm writing what I want there.
Yeah. I'm going to check that quickly because I can't remember, because I did a bit of score editing recently on Logic for Mac to try and troubleshoot something for my daughter. I'm pretty sure you can. Hold on.
Okay.
I just brought it up. I'm not sure I can get the score editor up. I'll reserve judgment. I can't remember. I think it was there.
Okay.
But it might not. But the Logic one on the Mac at least is hard work, and it has because of course they have to approximate what's in the piano roll editor if you recorded something from MIDI.
Exactly.
And then you find that, if you're lucky, you find that little setting that controls how it estimates it.
Yeah. It's a different way of working for sure.
Yeah.
And then with Swift Playgrounds, so I'm not a developer, and I've tried to use Swift Playgrounds to learn how to code. I don't know if my mind's just not wired that way, but it seems like, in your mind, is this an app that you could like go from nothing to like having your first basic app written, or are other books and like research tools needed for you to learn how to get started with Swift and actually write your own app if you've never coded before?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. That I suppose it depends if you've done any coding at all before.
Yeah.
Really, I think if you haven't, they have those, but they've had them from the beginning. Those basic tutorials.
Yeah, those are a lot of fun. I can move the character on the screen. It's like, oh, I get this part.
Yeah. That
at some point loses
basics.
me.
Yeah, and kind of the dirty secret of making native iOS apps is there's a ton of stuff to think about, and and they've done a great job with the new Swift UI stuff and what they call the Swift UI app lifecycle, so that I think that was required before they enabled you to actually build apps on Playgrounds, which you can do now. I think last year or the year before that happened. And that's amazing. So you can get pretty far, but I think you're going to be making basic apps.
Right.
At that point, which can be incredibly fulfilling. But for example, I could never have made Captionista in that.
No, I think subscriptions are not allowed through Playgrounds, just business model.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, but that would not be a very small reason why I can.
It's very small. A lot more to it than why you can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's hundreds of source files, and managing that in that interface is going to be painful.
Okay. Yeah.
And Objective-C, which isn't supported. I don't have much.
Yeah.
There's little bits.
But a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. I know there's people learning how to code all the time, and I don't know. In retrospect, it seems like it'd been so much easier to start in 2008 when everything was just so basic. I don't know if that's true or not, because it was probably hard back then too.
It was super hard back then, mainly because Objective-C was such a strange language.
Yeah.
And Apple's APIs and their frameworks that they provide are really great. There's something to behold in terms of API design. I've always admired them, but they do them in very different ways sometimes to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So, if you've been learning languages like Python and Java and seeing how those things work and the way people make frameworks, there's often a slightly different way of thinking about the abstract things in Apple platforms, which is what makes them great, in my view. So you still have that learning curve, but now with the SwiftUI stuff, they've made it much, much simpler. You can get really far. Okay. It is amazing. But what I'm saying about, say, Captionista or apps of this complexity, they may look quite small on the surface, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of text manipulation, stuff that's hard to get right. There's a lot. Multi-threading concerns, performance.
Yeah.
Once you can make an app, but can you make an app that doesn't jitter and and run out of memory?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Memory on the iPad is so weird. I've got the 16 gigabytes and I can only have these 4 apps open, and it's weird. It seems like they should work on that.
But one app can use about 14 gigabytes.
We can. I think LumaFusion is one of those apps that asks for that and gets it.
Yeah. We do that in Concepts too.
Oh, you do? Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, in the day job,
With Concepts, do you have a personal use of it for kind of day-to-day stuff, or is it mainly testing the app and whatnot?
It's mainly testing. I do some diagramming and I use it like a piece of paper, to sketch things out, try to solve problems visually. But I'm set back significantly by being very, very bad at drawing and writing.
Yeah.
I am challenged severely in that way, in a way that people don't quite believe it when I say it. But if I then try to draw anything, you soon find out
the little stick figures
it's a problem.
And stuff. Yeah.
Well, even trying to get decent boxes, and my handwriting is just never worked. So on the Mac, I used to use OmniGraffle a lot.
Yeah, because it'll fix your circles and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or you start on the Mac at least, Well, in fact, no, I used OmniGraffle on the iPad a lot as well in the past. But just starting with the rectangle tool saves a whole lot of pain for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as Concepts, anything else worth mentioning before we move on?
Concepts is a fantastic sketching app and for note-taking with an infinite canvas, and that's my day job. I've worked for them for several years now.
And you do the user interface, or what's your role there?
Yeah, I'm one of the iOS engineers, so Concepts is a cross-platform product now. It supports Windows, Android, and iOS. And so I work on the iOS UI, and the last couple of years I've been focusing on the gallery and the file system integration as we work on the process towards iCloud support, which is on our roadmap and coming soon. Lots and lots to do, and performance work and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And iOS and iPad, I presume?
Yeah.
Okay. Any weird challenges like expanding to iPad or scaling down to iPhone? Is iPad the starting point, or do you start with the phone and scale up from there?
For Concepts, it's iPad centric, really. I mean, we support the iPhone, but we'd like to do a lot more there. But,
it seems like iPad with Pencil is just such a natural fit with that app, and the phone, it seems like, would be mainly for viewing stuff, I would imagine, for most people.
Yes, and it is puzzling that Apple hasn't really done anything with a pointing device on the phone, or a pencil. Yeah,
a little mini pencil for the iPhone Max,
Yeah, because the Samsung was it Galaxy Note product from years back that's super popular in certain markets. I'm not sure what Apple are thinking there.
It's like, get an iPad if you want your pencil. And then so Captionista, we're going to discuss it in depth in a bit here, but anything worth mentioning here as far as kind of the apps on your iPad that you're using?
Circling back to what we were saying earlier, I've been using this LumaFusion or Final Cut Pro through to Captionista workflow to do all the marketing videos for that, and then upload them individually to the different social networks, because there doesn't seem to be a great solution yet for cross-posting.
Yeah. The Mac, I think Final Cut had this like tool that would do all the uploading to different places. I don't even know if that's still a thing or not. Yeah.
I don't know, but
Elgato on the Mac had this awesome tool. You bought this like USB encoder thing, and it did all the uploading from that. But that's such a long, archaic product, since Macs are so much faster at exporting.
Yeah, and then you get the network operators changing their APIs, or there aren't official APIs, and then things stop working.
Yeah.
I don't think there is a TikTok API yet for uploading. I may be wrong, but I don't think there was last time I checked. And so people like the scheduling app Buffer, they have patchy support for some of these networks, or there are limitations.
Yeah.
You have to finish off the process in the app, for example.
Gotcha. Yeah. So before we move on, I just want to ask, is there anything about the iPad in particular that you kind of love about it? Different, what separates it from the Mac for you, and what about the iPad do you love?
Yeah, I love the simplicity. I have quite a lot of heated discussions with people who love Macs, and I understand for a lot of people macOS is super important, and it's almost part of their identity.
Yeah.
And I like you, I think I've been using macOS since about 2005, 2006, which probably makes me a Mac baby, really.
Right. Yeah. We're Intel people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
Intel generation. Yeah. But I wouldn't be upset if macOS went away.
Yeah.
If
Xcode somehow made its way to iPad OS and visionOS or whatever.
Yes, it's like, I mean, if we were left with the Swift Playgrounds editor to write our apps, that would be a problem.
Yes, not quite there yet.
But and I'm also not really someone who wants Xcode for Mac on the iPad, and I don't want to run macOS on an iPad.
Yeah.
But there must be some middle ground.
Yeah. I've always thought Swift Playgrounds will eventually get better and evolve to be Xcode Lite, or the next generation of Xcode, kind of like we have Final Cut Pro 10. They eventually got all the tools it needed from Final Cut Pro 7. Yeah, I don't know if Apple's long goal is Swift Playgrounds becomes the new Xcode with all the features you actually need at some point. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think not, but it doesn't mean that there won't be some kind of Xcode thing for iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, they're clearly moving towards greater simplicity on macOS, and maybe somehow that will grease the wheels of bringing something like Xcode over to iPad.
Yeah. Vision Pro to me feels like a desktop computing environment anywhere you are. And using iPad apps as a foundational point gives me hope that, visionOS first apps would also come to iPad, and maybe they're more powerful because of, this visionOS thing that's coming around. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's pretty interesting, isn't it, that while you can magically take the screen of a Mac and put it into visionOS, you can't run Mac apps on it.
No,
but you can
that was a
iPad
rumor
apps.
That eventually that would be a thing, but not yet announced.
No, I mean, I suspect it's likely to go the other way, that they might make it so that you could bring the screen of an iPad over into visionOS.
That'd be cool.
Potentially, which would be great, especially if people have multiple devices.
Yeah.
And that means the headset would have to do less processing.
That was always the thing. Like, why would I want that? Because iPad apps can theoretically run there, but if it has less processing, then it could do more. Like, I don't know what the thresholds are for. Can I run 10 apps simultaneously on visionOS, and maybe not if they're. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's an M2, so it should be fine. But the question, I mean, you've got to say the battery life has to be affected by how much work it's doing. So.
Yeah, and I know. When you look at an app, maybe it runs full power. Then when you're not looking, it's not fully running. how does that affect you trying to export a video in LumaFusion? Do you have to look at the entire time for that to stay open? Probably not. That would be weird.
Well, you have to do that on iOS, on iPad.
Yeah, well, with LumaFusion, it actually runs in the background now. I've tested this. I can leave the stage, and LumaFusion keeps running. I'm not sure for how long, but definitely does take advantage of the RAM and I think some background rendering at this point. Final Cut does not.
No. The Apple's official AV export APIs say, and because we use them, we have the same issue.
Yeah.
They say it will not carry on in the background. And it does automatically terminate. So maybe LumaFusion are not using that as their encode pipeline.
Yeah. And this stuff is less painful with Stage Manager because you can have like windows on top of the backgrounded app, and it's still in the foreground technically.
Yeah. That would be really nice. I always assumed that limitation of video exports in the background was related to the video export acceleration in the hardware because they probably can only do one at a time.
That would make sense, yeah. But the Mac also has that feature, and they carry on just fine.
True. So who knows? Maybe it's changed. I need to look into it. But yeah, like you say, Final Cut Pro still has that limitation. They put up a little box, don't they, saying...
I'd encourage you to play around with LumaFusion, because my memory is I could leave the stage and it's just fine. I don't know if I could leave it for an hour or if it's 5 minutes or what the threshold is, but it is better than it used to be. It used to be
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you mean you leave the stage as in you're just switching to a different window in Stage Manager?
No, I mean, I can go to a completely separate stage and it'll continue rendering. I remember before, if I left, it would just... This is pre-Stage Manager, but if I went to a different full-screen app, it would just stop instantly. But now there is at least a little bit of a buffer. I don't know if it's 5 minutes or 2 minutes, but it doesn't instantly stop on
it's super nerdy, but I'll have a look at that because it might be that I should know this, but in Stage Manager, it may be that your app doesn't actually go into the background. It's in the non-active state.
Right.
So maybe it's permitted. Yeah.
So, anything else about iPad before we move on to Captionista, your app?
I don't think so. Just recapping that it's the simplicity I like. Even on Mac OS, I have now switched to Stage Manager. I don't want to be managing Windows manually. I have zero interest in that.
Very cool.
Yeah. But in the past feature, Spaces never really worked for me. I love Spaces. That was the Leopard feature, I believe. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Back then, it was a true Spaces because Leopard was themed as like outer space. It was like such a fun and delightful time in the Mac. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Time Machine had this fun UI back then.
Yeah.
Yes,
I can't. Is that completely gone now?
I think it's less fun. I think you're no longer going in outer space to use Time Machine or whatever.
Yeah. But then Time Machine is super buried these days as well.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it doesn't exist on iPad.
I would love Time Machine for iPad. Hook up an external hard drive, have it sync to that, back up to that.
Yeah.
Because one of my challenges is it wants to back up all like 1 terabyte of my iPad to iCloud, and that's problematic. I'm running out of space because I have a lot of stuff stored in, on my iPad, and my backup's like 600, 700 gigs. And there's no way to Time Machine it or doing
No, but it is surprising that they don't offer Time Machine for at least iCloud files.
Right.
They'd have to increase the storage.
Right. That's another baffling thing. Why don't we have bigger? It's been 2 terabytes forever.
Yeah. What's that all about?
Yeah. It's infuriating. Because I don't share my iCloud storage with my family. I instead pay for another 2 terabytes that the rest of the family shares amongst themselves. So I have my own 2 terabytes, and then everyone else shares 2 terabytes because, and I tried the thing of, I tried upgrading to the iCloud or Apple One Premium, and it did not enable 4 terabytes as everyone else's accounts does. Something about me having like an iTunes media account and iCloud being separate. I don't know.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you can have the separate accounts like that. That's interesting.
You can choose to not share your iCloud storage, and then you can have a different family member buy like 2 terabytes that's shared amongst everyone else in the family. So that's a thing. So if a kid in your family, has 2 terabytes, you could have them separately and using 2 terabytes, and you have your own 2. Yeah. And then you could have something that's shared.
It's interesting though. I'm just looking at my my iPad, and it says we are only using as a family 740 gig of the 2 terabytes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So I think we're okay. But my photos library, the family photos library, is bigger than all of the space used by all the rest of the family.
Yes. And that's going to be the growing concern. Photos are just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So, Captionista, give me the elevator pitch for what this app is and who it's for. We've kind of talked a bit about it already, but tell me about Captionista.
Yeah, Captionista is built around getting more people to subtitle videos. Videos are the primary way of communicating now in social media. It's where all the marketing really happens. It's where you engage people. But it pains me so much to see people going to the effort of making video content or taking long clips out of longer form content, and they throw it up without any attempt to subtitle it at all. And they don't realize that is like sending someone voice messages all the time and expecting them to listen to them all. And I'm sorry to disappoint people, but nobody is looking at those videos. If they don't have the time, or they don't have their audio on, or they're deaf, or they're in a noisy environment, they're just not gonna go with it. And then even when people do subtitle videos, often it's tiny text you can't read in the social feed, or it's just very tasteless. The contrast isn't enough. The background hasn't got enough padding, and it looks bad. So there's all these missed opportunities here, and that is because there's a lot to think about. And most people think of captions and subtitles as an afterthought. Yeah. So we made the app to make it easier to do that stuff quickly, and make less mistakes, because there's nothing more demoralizing than spending a lot of time making video content, which is time consuming and difficult for many people anyway.
Yeah.
And then posting it and finding that your subtitles get cropped off in the feed because you didn't think about the aspect ratio or the position of them, and all these tricky things that you only learn by doing, and it's painful.
I've definitely posted before a caption that had a typo in it that was just, oh crap, I gotta pull this.
Yeah, there's that too. I mean, that's more difficult to protect against, because we're getting already going to get into the weeds now with the subtitles, but it is a process that takes time if you want it to be good, and this is the thing that we're trying to go for, is to make it easier for you to get good results. We can't do it all for you. You have to review what you're posting.
Right.
You have to, yeah. And sometimes even when you review it, you'll still make a mistake, like you did that time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that can be done, because if you're just starting with a raw video, most people don't even think about putting captions on it. We already established that. And some people go, I'll just throw some AI captions on it. I'll just tick that box and let that happen. And then they just post it, they don't review it, and it says something terrible, which is hopefully not too embarrassing, but it could say some really bad stuff. And then, you go to a level beyond that where you're actually reviewing it and you're using AI, or you can go a level further where you're timing everything and you really want it to feel nice and look nice. Of course, that's a kind of a pyramid of professionalism that gets smaller and smaller as you get towards the top. But we're trying to get people in the middle of that, really, the people who care but don't necessarily know all the details, and make it simpler for them.
Where'd the idea for this app come from? Was it something you needed personally, or someone you knew?
Yeah. No. Back, I'm going to talk politics slightly here.
Sure.
Hopefully not difficult. But back in 2019, we had an ill-fated general election in the UK.
Yeah.
Where the Brexit stuff happened and we ended up with a Conservative government again. But at that time, I was helping the local Green Party, which is, as it implies, the local kind of the Environmental and Socialist Party of England, really, the Green Party. And the local representatives of that party, I was volunteering to help them with their social videos.
Yeah.
I said, because it was just at the time, actually, 2019, just before COVID, when selfie videos were starting to take off.
Sure.
People were posting those as Reel. I'm not even sure Reels existed just then. I don't think they did, but video posts did. Because TikTok wasn't really on the scene then.
No, not as huge at least.
So people were starting to do that, and we had these like local politicians or volunteers out recording video, which is difficult for them anyway. It's not their natural environment, and then sending in these videos to be posted, but they needed to be subtitled. No one knew how to do it.
Yeah.
2019, we didn't have all the AI options we have now.
No.
So I put my hand up and said I would do that. I'd find a way, and I used a service online to do it manually. And it was expensive, and it wasn't very good.
Yeah.
I was doing
in 2019. I did something similar for a local election thing, and I was editing the video and using LumaFusion to manually put in title text as subtitles, basically.
Oh, wow.
It was excruciatingly time consuming.
Oh,
yes.
You have my sympathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very time consuming work to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. It is, and so I was manually transcribing. The videos were coming in with terrible audio, recorded on a terrible phone.
Yep.
In a corner of a room full of people. The video was then transferred via WhatsApp to me in low resolution, low quality, and I had to transcribe it. Maximum volume, really trying to hear what is actually being said. And that's the first time I'd ever really had to do that. So I learned a lot doing it. So once I got the transcriptions, you learn about all the mistakes people make, the ums and ahs, and the repetitions that you don't even notice.
Yeah.
And you start to think, do you actually want to include that in the transcription or not?
Yeah, the subtitle, I'm not going to put in that. That seems weird.
Yeah. And he said that twice, but it was the same word. I'll just put it in once.
Right.
Because it was a stumble. But so there was the transcription part, and then the interface I was using was a web-based app, which I won't name, but it had an interface where you would type in one piece of text at a time, and you set a start and end time, and then you move to the next one. And that sounds very reasonable.
Right.
But if you've actually done that for video, for a lot of videos or videos of any length, it is a terrible, terrible way to do it, because when you're transcribing, you realize... you're trying to split it into subtitles that read well on screen and that they break in places that make sense.
Totally.
And also, if you are transcribing actual spoken content, you want it to fit in quite well with the speech. But if people have not thought about they've not thought about the pace at which they're speaking when they recorded it, that can actually give you real challenges, because if you want to have a 2-line subtitle style, because you don't want to cover too much of the video,
right.
And they're talking super quickly, now you've got a problem, because you're breaking it very often and switching to a new subtitle before people can read it. So then you have to dial back the text size, or you have to break it in different places. And in an interface where you're doing it one subtitle at a time and setting start and end times, you have to then, if you want to re-break or re-wrap anything, you have to go back, change all the start and end times as well, proof it all. It's super, super hard work. It's
very meticulous.
Yes, it's and very time consuming. But of course, it does depend on how much you care about the results.
Yeah, and for some of them, I'd have emphasized words in yellow or whatever.
That too. So there's a whole lot going on there. And it was a pretty painful process, and I did quite a few of them. And at the end of it, I thought there has to be a better way.
Yeah.
And that's how I came up with the idea for the mechanism, basically, of get your transcript, then watch the video, and tap the words when you want to split it into a subtitle. that was the inspiration.
Yeah.
Which can sound obvious, but it's actually doing a whole bunch of things at once, because you're splitting the text at a time that looks reasonable to you,
yep.
but then also you're setting the timing as well in one action.
Yeah.
While also proofing it. So it's a kind of magical layers of work going on that you don't even realize once you understand how it works.
Yeah. The transcription, is that totally manual? Have you played around with... I know there's a way for like live captioning to work within iOS, but I'm not sure if you get that data to actually use as a starting point.
Yes, at the moment we are completely manual, because we've focused on, and it's controversial in some ways. A lot of people, they just expect AI, they won't consider it if it's not AI. But we wanted to get the interface for manual subtitling right first.
Right. Which will be the most accurate starting point for sure.
Yes, if you proof your own typos well enough. But it enables you to title videos that don't have audio, or the audio is too noisy for it to be picked up well by AI. The error rate's too high, or people with speech impediments or difficult accents. Language is not supported by your AI. So the manual base of it is fundamental to it all.
Yeah.
And we have been experimenting with Apple's new improved transcription code in iOS 17. We may do something with that. We have some ideas, but key to that is how you handle the corrections, because you will always have to correct it. There's even if you use one of these other services like Whisper, a lot of people criticize Apple for not being at the forefront of the AI stuff with dictation and so on, but they are pretty good. But you're always going to have to correct things and add punctuation. Some of them add punctuation. Apple added some punctuation in iOS 17 now, but it's never going to capture it in a way a writer would. So again, it depends how much you care. So if we are going to have an AI transcription, we've got to be able to get in there and make small corrections quickly, so that it's not taking longer than not using the AI.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of the times people, I can understand it. People see transcribing, say, a minute of audio as quite a lot of work, or a few minutes of it. It's off-putting, because you think I'm going to have to be listening there for minutes and typing away and correcting all my typos.
Yeah.
But if you do it with AI, you're still going to have to go back and check it. You're going to have to edit word by word. It depends what service you use and what the interface is for doing that.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of them are particularly great at making a whole lot of edits.
Right.
You're going to be diving into lots of different bits of UI, clicking once, then typing the new word, and then getting out of that mode, clicking on something else. And then you've got to check it all again at the end.
Yeah.
So I think in total, you probably use the same amount of time, but maybe you don't feel like you had to do so much work.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Which is valid.
Yeah.
But we want support for languages, and the other thing is, I trust Apple. Apple have some limits apparently on how the length of audio that you can transcribe, but they do have the benefit of the on-device transcription, which isn't as good, but never leaves your device. And that's another thing we wanted to do is we don't need any network services for you to subtitle your videos. So if you're in a bunker in the Ukraine and you're a journalist, you can actually subtitle a video, even if you don't have internet, and you go somewhere where you have internet and you post it.
Right.
So there is that, but we don't have any control over the results, because we don't make the AI service.
Yeah.
So I don't feel very happy selling a product and taking a subscription from people where I can't control the quality of that output.
Yeah.
So that was my reticence initially as well. That was a big part of it. But with Apple's, we may do something, but we want to do something that's really good if we do it at all.
That makes sense, yeah. And then, do you have a way of knowing where these videos end up? Like, do you know, is TikTok or YouTube Shorts a huge part of where your users are posting these, or do you hear from your users and, are companies, subscribing and using this app?
Yeah, we hear a little bit from users. We've got quite a small user base at the moment, to be honest, but we do hear from some quite active users, and it seems to be primarily Reels and TikTok.
Okay.
But initially, when we released the app, we had quite a lot of interest from pro video editors who use Macs. They liked it, but they said, "Oh, but it's not going to fit into my workflow because it's not on the Mac."
Yeah.
So we may look at doing that, but again, it's a different ball game because the UI is being designed to be very good for a mobile experience.
Right.
It's a touch-based experience, and it's not necessarily going to work for a half-hour video. That you're putting together on desktop, but it would be a lot better than Final Cut Pro's approach. Yeah. So we may yet do that, but we have to do things like, do we do Catalyst or not, and do we? How does the file management work? Is that going to be good enough if it's Catalyst and so on?
And as far as we talked earlier about subtitles can add a real style to your video depending on how you display it. How in depth do you go with, letting people create their style? Is there a way to save your templates of this is my color scheme and font style that I love and want to return to that for this series of videos, and maybe I have a different series of videos, I want a different style for that?
Yeah, we have loads of options around that. And for free users, so anybody can use Captionista for free, and they get a watermark on the exports, which is very common among apps, and they can use any of the predefined themes and color schemes that we provide. So if you then want to customize the style further, you need a pro subscription.
Okay.
But pro subscription also gets you saved custom themes. So you can create your theme for your brand or your particular social media marketing client and rack those up and get consistency in what you're producing that way. Because, of course, it's not just the styling. Our styling includes all the font and text settings you'd imagine, shadows and outlines and colors. But we have a bunch of background styles. So you can have a TikTok style rounded rectangles that follow the text, or you can have the Reels style bubbles, or you can have gradients at the bottom like you'd see in a movie. A whole bunch of things like that where you're not having to drag rectangles around or anything like that. We have these different templates of these background styles that are common, and you just choose the one you want. And then we also have the insets, like the safe area insets. So if you want to make sure the text can be seen, you need to restrict which part of the video it's in. So all of these come together and are saved in your custom themes.
Yeah, that's cool. And then with the watermark, with pro users or the paid users, could you replace that? So you don't have a watermark with the pro, but could you put your own watermark and brand it, or is that a tool for doing that part of the branding within Final Cut or LumaFusion?
That may be a feature that's quite high on our roadmap.
Okay, yeah. So just think about some people probably do want their logo on the corner of their video, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, in TV that's called the bug. Often,
yes.
You have the logo on your screen. You can have it as an iPad Pro TV logo up in the corner. I mean, that is certainly something we have planned. The watermark is just there at the moment because we had to do something to prevent the free use, or to facilitate free use, because it's very important to us. We want people to subtitle more videos, even if they never pay us any money, because for all the reasons, accessibility, campaigning on climate, all these kind of things, we use videos to do that. And if they don't have the text, we're missing a large percentage of the audience. Yeah,
it's a brilliant thing. It's advertising for you. It lets them use the app pretty much fully to learn how this app works, and if they do want to pay, they're very well versed at this app at that point. So you probably don't get you probably don't get refund requests because they already know what this app is, and it's like, oh, this is great. I know how to use it already. Let me pay for it.
No, exactly. You still get a few 1-star reviews, so
yeah. Something this is not on our list, but something I was just thinking about is Apple Vision Pro. I don't think fully have the specs of 3D video rendering and stuff. I love future Captionista of optimized for Apple Vision Pro. The the captions might be like 3D a little bit. I don't know if that's something you've even thought about, the future of like 3D rendered videos for these headsets in the future.
Yeah, I've certainly been thinking about it. It's interesting. Again, I think we touched on this earlier. The captioning or subtitles, the term means different things depending on who you talk to, but there's a whole range of utility from just getting your message across to everyone through to accessibility. There's all this stuff in between. So on an accessibility basis, you would imagine closed captioning, which we spoke about earlier, that can be customized by the accessibility user. That would probably not do too much fancy with 3D.
Yeah.
But they might have the option to bring it out of the video,
right?
For example, to make it easier for them to see.
Yeah.
But in terms of more kind of social video captioning, like you would in a TikTok video, for example, that could be really interesting. You could move things around in 3D over time, but it all hinges on what a social network's going to look like with 3D video.
Yeah. There's no standard yet, and Apple, I think, has their own different standard for 3D videos and what's even supported there. So it'll be curious to see how that evolves. And
will we somehow be able to watch 3D video on iPads and iPhones in future? If not, how do we edit them?
Right.
and that's going to be interesting. But if they supported it, and I mean, Instagram, TikTok, they haven't exactly done native apps for iPad, have they? That are very good.
Definitely not.
So I imagine they may not do that for visionOS either.
Yeah, but Safari, I'd imagine, would be able to display 3D videos. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah. It would be very cool.
Yeah. The actual Caption Sync. Describe it a little bit more. You mentioned tapping on words as they're showing up. What's that experience like?
Okay, so the workflow in Captionista is essentially 3-step. The first screen you see is the script screen, and that's where you put the text in. You type it in, or maybe you've actually used some other AI service to transcribe it.
Sure,
and
you can even hold up your iPhone next to your iPad and use like draft dictation and just like see how well that does for a first pass.
Yeah, you can do that, or you can press the dictation key and just talk to it, whatever. Yeah. So you get your text in there, and then you press the button to move to the next screen, which is the timeline. And here we show initially the full script as like a card on screen. And what you do is you press play and you listen to or watch the video. You may not have audio on the video. You might just be titling something that is silent.
Yeah.
And so you play the video and you look at the text, and when you want to split it into a new subtitle, you just tap the word where you want to split it at the time in the video when you want to split.
Yeah.
So then you end up with 2 cards on screen, and then you just keep going through this process. So it keeps playing now, and you're in the second subtitle, and maybe it's 10 lines long, and there's only 2 lines that can fit on the video,
right?
Because that's how you've set the style.
Yeah.
So it shows you the bottom half shaded out to show that it's too big. So you know that, and you just have to choose again the word where you want to split it and at the right time. And what you can do is, once you've gone through that process, if you want to tweak the timings, you just let it play, and when it gets to the subtitle you want to adjust, there's a start time and an end time button, and you just tap them at the time you want it to start or end. Nice. And if you tap the end button, you make the subtitle shorter, which means you've actually created a gap.
Yeah.
Between it and the next subtitle, and it works vice versa for the start time as well. So you can create gaps between subtitles that way, but all you're doing is playing the video and tapping on words or start and end time buttons. There's no fiddling around with time sliders or dragging things on timelines. It's much, much easier and faster once you understand how it works. That has been our challenge so far.
Have you played around with a way of, so you have these cards, a way of having these like sub cards where it like emphasizes a word as it's spoken? This would be a lot of timing data, tapping, pretty much every second as a different word is spoken, and having a way to have these bigger cards for all the subtitles and might, grow or, change a color when the word's spoken or something like that.
It's interesting. It's something we have been looking at because it does tie into the AI transcription story, because you get per word timings for that.
Right.
And you'll notice that most AI-based video transcription services, and even probably for the similar reasons, the closed captioning on, say, Twitter, rest in peace.
Yes.
They use a style of subtitling that is animated, that tends to show one word at a time, and then it scrolls up a bit, and then it shows you more. So you can, with that information, you can do that. But there's an argument that that's, for legibility, that's not necessarily great. And again, this comes back to, if you are subtitling a video to match the speech, the person's speaking rate actually determines your reading rate.
Yes,
which is a pretty twisted situation if you've got someone who speaks as quickly as say I have at some points in this
yes.
podcast. So it's tricky, and it's not necessarily the best. You may need more time to read it. So if you show things to say 2-3 lines at a time, that can give people more time to scan it.
Yeah, it's funny because there is with some captioning, you're reading it actively, and sometimes it's more like peripheral vision. It helps you be more aware as you're listening to what's going on, and that's a very different experience for sure.
Yeah, and there's an app out there, isn't there? I can't remember what it's called. Is it Blink or something there, where it will read stuff to you by showing it one word at a time quickly.
Yes, that's right.
You can. I can't remember if that's what it was called. So that's clearly, for some people, that also works. It's something we can do. I mean, you can do it right now, because you can put the video into slow mode when recording and just tap on each word if you want to, and it just splits, because there's essentially no cost to creating a subtitle, unlike these older systems where you have to create one at a time and adjust everything. So you will get a lot of scrolling happening in the UI.
Yes.
But yes, it is interesting. We could allow you to time individual words, even manually, within a card, if you wanted to have that one word at a time appearance. So it's certainly something we will continue to look at. Yeah.
So version 1.5 just came out pretty recently here. What are some of the big additions for the app?
We added 4 major features, really. We added some color trends. So I didn't explain that properly previously when talking about style. We have these set themes. We've got subtitles and captions. And in our terms, we're saying captions are the more fun kind of creative styles that are not so much focused on accessibility or being serious. But then you can choose one of those style themes, and then in the colors tab, you can actually choose one of dozens of color schemes we provide, which are combinations of background and foreground colors with sufficient contrast to always be legible. And they adapt to the theme that you've chosen. So if you've got a background style that is a solid bar at the bottom, it'll use that background color from there. But if you use one that doesn't have a background but has a shadow on the text, it'll use the background color as the shadow, and things like that. So you have these dozens of permutations of each theme in color terms anyway. But we added color trends, so we're going to have seasonal sets of these color schemes now that you'll be able to use. So at the moment we've got some nice fresh greens and bright yellows and reds, and we'll be changing that 2-3 times a year on top of the standard color schemes we provide. So that's one of the big features. Obviously appeals more to people who are doing social media posts, the kind of more fun posts on TikTok and Reels. We also added SRT export, so that's more for pros really who want the closed captioning experience for accessibility. Or you don't want to subtitle with Captionista, you're just using it to get the timings and the splits of the words. And then you can upload that SRT file to YouTube or Twitter alongside your video file, and then use the built-in closed captioning of the device the user's using. And
apps like DLC, I think you can import that if you're just using it locally on your iPad.
I tested with VLC, in fact, on my Mac. That's a tester feature there. We also added freestyle, which is one of the bigger feature really, where we allow you to do those TikTok and Reel style adjustments to each subtitle. So you can just drag it across the screen, rotate it, change its size, make it a bit more fun. And what's interesting for us about that is that we expect you to have split the subtitles already, and then you go into the freestyle mode, and then you can just flick between the subtitles very quickly and just move them all around how you like. Yeah. Whereas doing that in the native apps for, say, TikTok and Reels is actually quite painful to do those kinds of changes over time.
Do you have a way of growing a card over that time when it? So, say you have a new subtitle come up, you can have it start at one size and end at a different size. Is that something you've looked at?
We are looking at things like that at the moment. Again, we're stuck to the basics. We don't have animation of the subtitles. Again, it's that continuum between captions, subtitles, and titling. It's this fuzzy world. But we'd love to do stuff like that. We do have plans for some animations already. One of the things that we will be tackling soon is animating the backgrounds. At the moment, the backgrounds are either always there or they're not. But we can be smarter about that. So if there's a gap between two subtitles that's not too long, we'll plan to keep the background there for a while. Without any text over it. And then if there's a big gap, we'll let it fade out. It's that kind of thing. Not there yet, but yes, we'll do things like that. And once we've tackled that, we'll be able to do animations on sizes and things like that.
Very cool. And then I believe the Apple Pencil with M2 iPads have this hover ability.
Oh, sorry, yes, that's the other.
and then trackpads are also now supported for. Where this is in 1.5. Can you kind of explain the hover and where this kind of applies for in the app?
Yeah, and we had some very basic hover support on some of the buttons in the previous releases, but we went to town on it properly now. I find hover with the pencil and trackpad on iPad very interesting because it actually helps with discoverability. Because I mentioned, say, in the timeline screen on a subtitle card, we have the start and end buttons for the start and end time. But we know from our users on iPhone at least, a lot of people don't realize that that's a button. Whereas on iPad, it's very obvious because if you move over it, it lifts up. But then also we amended the timeline. So when you see the subtitle cards and you move the cursor or the pencil over the words to split subtitles, it shows you exactly which word will be split. And it puts a little cursor there to show you that it will split before that word. So it's very, very clear how it works. I'm sure we have a few people who come into this view, and despite the instruction text we have at the top, they press play on a video and they're tapping words and it's splitting and doing all kinds of stuff. They don't understand what's going on. It's one of the challenges. So it's great for discoverability, and it feels really nice. And actually, we recorded a video to show this, which we just posted a couple of days ago, to show the hover of the M2 pencil, showing this highlight cursor. But doing that, I felt like it wasn't good enough. So I've actually, there will be a point release that fixes a couple of bugs in 1.5, but also we are vastly improving that hover effect. So the actual word underneath the pencil will also highlight, not just the, it won't just show the cursor where the split will happen, because it's,
nice.
It can be a bit discombobulating, but it's actually been quite challenging to get right. It was one of those things I thought, I'll just fix that because that's not good. That's not good enough. And then a day or two later, I'm thinking, wow, okay, there's quite a lot more to do. But yeah, so hopefully in a few days we'll have that done.
Yeah, the Apple Pencil hover is a very cool thing. I wish the M1 had it.
Yes,
it's not something that I'm going to rush out and upgrade my iPad for, but it is cool when I eventually get another iPad that it'll be there.
Yeah, I'd have to ask my business partner who helps with the design of the app. He is an illustrator, so he lives on his iPad, and he has an M2, so he does all that testing for me with the pencil.
Very cool. Any other ways the app shines on iPad versus using it on the iPhone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did obviously focus on iPhone because, as far as we can tell, most social media marketers, they're using iPhones, they're just throwing content out all the time.
Right.
But we wanted to do a really good job on iPad. And one of the great things is the video is always large, because we have this split screen display with the video on the left and the script or the timeline, depending on what mode you're in, on the right. So you can see everything nice and large. Even if it's a portrait video, for example, it will fill the space nicely.
Yeah.
And you can see the subtitles overlaid. You can read them easily at any size, really. Whereas on an iPhone, you can end with a portrait video, especially the video player is at the top, then the editing is at the bottom. So you can end up with a very small thumbnail at the top for a portrait video, which is why we did introduce the full screen zoom option in this release as well. But really that shines on iPhone, but on iPad it shines already because you have this nice big display. And also on the iPad you can have that workflow to go from, I mean, it's new really for Final Cut because LumaFusion is there on the iPhone already, but at least on iPad, going from Final Cut into Captionista to title a video is great.
Yeah, because you can just export right from Final Cut into Captionista and just work.
I will add a little caveat there for the listeners. Version 1.5 in the App Store does have a little bug in it where if you share from Final Cut into Captionista, it doesn't import it. That is fixed in 1.5.1, which will be available soon.
Excellent. Yeah, and hopefully it is out by the time this episode goes up, because there will be a bit of a delay here. Any kind of like ideas you have going forward? We've talked a bit on some of the ideas you have for other features you want to bring to the app one day. Anything else worth sharing of just ideas that you have for future updates?
Yeah, we have so much. The challenge we have is we're still trying to find what they call, product market fit. We're trying to find where most of our users are to decide what to do next. But we have a lot of ideas, things around multi-voice transcripts, things you've mentioned to me about highlighting individual words, potentially, per subtitle styling changes. At the moment the style is consistent through all the subtitles, but obviously we would look to enable more flexibility around that. There's more closed captioning formats which would be good to feature. There are a whole bunch of different broadcast standard formats which maybe would be useful. We would like to improve the project creation. At the moment, when you create a project, you're then prompted to import a video from Photos, and then the work begins from there. We'd like to streamline that flow so that you go into an empty project and then you can choose where your video comes from or replace it, and maybe tell us what the video's for, because then we can do other things to help you along the way if we know what you're trying to achieve.
For TikTok versus that kind of stuff.
I mean, something we didn't mention is that one of the unique features we have we call pre-flight check, where you tap on the icon on the video and we show you the resolution, the duration, and then we show you a whole bunch of warnings if necessary per social network about duration issues. You can have it too long to include in a reel, for example, or on a story. We show resolution issues if someone sent you like those old Green Party videos that you used to get, which are 400 pixels square from WhatsApp. It's going to warn you that that's going to suck. And then when you export, we offer to automatically upscale it to HD, so the text at least looks good.
Oh, nice.
Because if we draw the text over a low resolution video, it's going to look terrible.
Yes.
So there's this whole connection of trying to solve problems for you before they happen. Unfortunately, we can't solve your video content issues all the time. So more on that. So if we know more about what the user's trying to do with the project, we can do an even better job of that.
Yeah. The multi-person thing's pretty cool, where you have different colors for different people or something like that. Yeah,
we got a lot of interesting ideas about that. We could do a super good job of it, but I've got to try to work out where's the right place to spend our time, because there's a few things in the app where I've spent way too much time on things people will not notice.
Anything we haven't covered that you'd like to before we wrap it up?
Yes, I mean, well, there's one thing. part of this, two things actually. One is we give away free copies, free licenses for the Pro to anybody who is working in certain fields of campaigning or journalism. We do this all the time. People just have to get in touch with us. We'd love to have more take up of this. So we have a page on our website that people can see. It's called Activism. There's a page link there. You just go to that on the Captionista.app. And it explains the kind of things we want to try to help, especially climate change, all this kind of thing, gender equality and so on. But then separately, there's the whole accessibility story. Accessibility of open captions burned into the video is better than no captions. Closed captions and burned in captions give you the best of both worlds, and we now support that in 1.5. But what I specifically wanted to say is that the app itself, I'm afraid to say, is not particularly accessible currently.
Okay.
Because, and I feel very strongly about that, but it's something that is very difficult for me to deal with at the moment.
because you're clicking on text. Like if someone's not visually there, you're having voiceover read each word, and you're trying to click on it as you're playing live. That seems a challenging thing to deal with.
Yeah. Yes, and in the whole gamut of accessibility, not just voiceover. So, it's physical interaction issues, hearing issues, sight issues. It's a strange thing. If you're going to subtitle a video, you need quite a lot of senses. So there's somewhat intractable problems in some situations, but we could certainly do better. And it's going to take some time, but I think for a lot of users, I'll be able to create a better interface for manual subtitling than you would normally get. But it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Do you have options? I forget if you have options to make the text bigger as you're separating them into cards. Are you able to make that pretty big if people have issues with just like reading?
Yes. Oh, so that's actually another benefit of the iPad version, because we fill full 50% of the screen with the timeline view, and we have a WYSIWYG view of the subtitles basically that you tap on. Yep. So it will fill the available space there. Nice. So they're very big tap targets already. Good. And very easy to read usually.
Definitely a helpful thing for accessibility.
I mean, in many cases they couldn't be bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, where can people find more information about Captionista? Okay, well, Captionista's website is at Captionista, Captionista.app. You could search the App Store for it. I had someone tell me they were doing that the other day, and it was showing no results. That is App Store search for you sometimes. Yes, other high-profile apps have had that. But that's the way you can find it. We have loads of information. We have help stuff up there as well. We've got a community page, the activism page. And that's the best way to find us. Captionista app on TikTok, on Instagram as well, and Twitter. Yes. Yeah, uncertain about saying that now, but we are also on Threads. Yeah. actually, I'm going to say, no, we're not quite. Yes. Do you have a way of searching the... I don't know, with TikTok, is there a way to search for Captionista, the watermarks, where you could like repost those in any simple way? Or not really? I wish. Yeah, that'd be nice. I wish, no. Yeah, if people mention us or let us know, we'll happily repost anything as long as it's not family friendly. Yes. Non-objectional things. Yes. And doesn't conflict with our activism policy as well. Yeah. We happily do that. Yeah. And it's nice. We see some users do that. It's really nice when that happens. Yeah. Where can folks find you on the interwebs? My personal social presence is Marc Palmer Dev at Instagram and Twitter. That's Mark with a C. And on Mastodon, I'm at Marc Palmer at iosdev.space. Very cool. And it used to be so much easier. We just had the one monopoly, Yeah, just too much now. It's all this stuff. Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate your time. This has been a great chat.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to talk to somebody about something that's turned out to be quite important to me through the process.
Yes. Well, that has been a discussion with Mark. My thanks to Mark for his time recording this episode, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast and the Vision Pros podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that said, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.